Hello and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansevieri.
And Amy Cornell.
And we were in the green room and we were both getting super excited about this show because I think that this is groundbreaking, people. Share this with a friend. We are going to reset all your expectations in terms of book sales and give you some several big reality. Apparently I can't talk because I'm so excited about this show. Several really big reality checks in terms of how many books that traditionally published authors actually sell. And the reason that I framed it that way is because so often indie authors, and I am also an indie author, but so often I hear from indie authors, they say, well, I would really rather be with a traditionally published, have my book traditionally published because then I'll get all the things and I'll sell more books.
Mm-hmm.
Recent statistics from Jane Friedman's Bottom Line newsletter, which it's a paid subscription. If you're not subscribing to it, I highly recommend you do. There's tons of great information. 25% of all traditionally published books. Now, get ready for this mic drop, people. 25% of all traditionally published books sell fewer than a dozen copies. 1 dozen.
Crazy.
Right? And so if you feel like you're not selling enough books, if you've only sold 7, you're right. You are right in line with where the numbers stand with the traditionally published books, right?
That is so crazy.
When I shared this article with you originally out of Jane Friedman's newsletter, weren't you just like, oh my gosh?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I had all these thoughts about publishers and myths.
Strong feelings.
And very strong feelings. I know that's not what this show is, but
right.
They kind of hand in hand.
Well, and I think that, I think if you called up some statistics when we were in the green room, so feel free to drop those in anytime because they were really good. And, I loved Amy just showed up with all these statistics in the show, which I thought was amazing because I'm such a nerd. I love numbers.
Yes, it was very out of character. But with that, and just to give you an idea here, I love these comparisons because to me, I realize it's not quite so black and white, but I really do think when people go independent, a lot of people do that knowing they're going to have to put in the work. You know what I mean? That's something that they accept. But so I love this. The average self-published book, I don't love it, but you know what I mean? I love it compared to the traditionally published when we're talking about myths and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
The average self-published book sells fewer than 250 copies total, with many selling under 100. But again, everybody listening, sorry, people are quickly just signing off.
I know. We're done with this show. We're unsubscribing. Sorry, bye.
Right. But look at the difference, though. That is significantly higher than the stat that you quoted for the traditionally published book.
Yes.
So that's the part that I love. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a different, but yet the myth, it continues.
Yeah.
That somehow traditionally published is at a different level, and that's the secret to success.
Right, exactly. And I think that it is, and this is something that and part of the reason why we were so passionate about doing this show is because a lot of times, and I don't mean to jump all over Facebook, author groups, but a lot of times I will, and I see this in Reddit strings too, where people will show up and they'll say, I sold 10,000 books today. I'm so excited. And then the rest of everybody else in the group just feels terrible. Right. They're like, well, I sold 1 in the last month and I'm a loser and I feel awful. And maybe they were actually telling the truth. I told Amy, we were talking about this in the green room. I'm like, I think people should bring receipts. If you're going to show up, mm-hmm. and you're going to, look, congratulations to you. Boast about your book sales all day long. I think if you're selling, scads of books, that is amazing. That is fabulous. And everyone's going to want to know your secret. But, anybody can throw out any number. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not like suggesting that everybody's out there lying, but I mean, some people may really quite, they may have like a different relationship with the truth than you or I do, right? Because,
Right.
and I've had authors that have come to me after like being in these Facebook, because, it's keyboard courage, right? It's easy to post anything online and live our best life and all the things that we,
Sure.
have
They're
kind of
also
come.
not saying they're spending over $5,000 on Amazon ads a month.
Well, right. And here's the thing though too is, so I did talk to somebody who was selling like a lot of books, right? And it's exactly what you said. And then I said, and so I had a conversation with him and I'm like, well, how did you do that? Well, he's spending something like, I want to say it was like $7,000 a month on Facebook ads,
Oh no.
which, right.
Sorry.
And then also,
Clearly Amy doesn't play poker.
right. No, but I think it was actually somewhere in the range of 5,000
Wow.
on Amazon ads or something. So if you do the math on that, all right. So let's say so you've sold 10,000 books. That's amazing. Okay. But then you've also invested, right, 12,000 in ads, like ad spend, and maybe more in some cases. Okay. So then you have to figure like the cost of your book on Amazon, and you get either 70 or 30%, depending on what your deal is. Right. So are you really making any money, or are you just throwing it? You know what I mean? So
many factors. Yeah.
there's so many factors. And again, don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole on that. But I think that, book sales are very questionable. And one of the other reasons for that is because Amazon's very cone of silence, right? So they don't release their book sales numbers, in particular for ebooks, right? Which I find questionable at best, right?
Yes.
So there's a company called BookScan, and BookScan basically checks in with, direct to consumer library sales, not direct to consumer, excuse me, but anything that like libraries, bookstores, right? But they're not capturing everything. They're not, and that's part of the problem, right? Self-published books are largely invisible because Amazon doesn't release those numbers.
Right. And the small press titles, Penny, you and I were chatting about that in the green room too. There are people that go with these kind of arms of bigger publishing names and assume that it's all equal when it's definitely not,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I think so. Why don't you start us with the big publisher myth? Because this is also, it's also this sequence is also really interesting in terms of the book sale numbers and the myth around that we've been talking about.
And this is a huge one. I love this. This is one of the biggest myths in getting a publisher. They'll handle the marketing.
Oh my gosh, I have strong feelings.
I know. And we even have in our notes, this is one of the most dangerous sentences in publishing.
Yeah.
Because it is so far from the truth. The reality is publishers really do concentrate their resources on a very small number of lead titles. And honestly, those lead titles, those are household names. Let's just call a spade, right, Penny?
Yes.
Like, these are not never heard of debut authors by any stretch.
Right.
So these are already people that you've heard of that are already super successful because publishers want to make money. They're going for the sure thing, They're more than happy to help new authors get their books out there. That's what they are. They produce books, but really it's very much, I wish I had an animal top of mind right now, but like the kind of animals that give birth and then leave, like a turtle.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's like, I left you in your egg here with all the other eggs that you're going to be competing with. I'm out. I've got things to do. Like that's much what it's like to be with a big publisher. You're there with a bunch of other little turtles. Hopefully you make it and a bird doesn't snatch you off, all the things, but you really are kind of left to your own devices. And that's why, at the beginning, when I was talking about what I love about people that consciously decide to go independent, is that so many of them, not everybody, but so many realize what they're really taking on. And so they approach this whole business of being an author from a very different perspective versus having to play catch up after the fact once they realize, oh my gosh, I'm out here doing this alone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that, you know, we've talked to enough authors who have come from or who are in the midst of being published by a traditional publisher and then realizing that publishers not doing anything in marketing. Like you said, like the turtles left and the eggs are on their own. Now we've turned this whole show into an episode of National Geographic. But
Yeah, exactly.
right. But like I felt then it's where I always feel bad for the little turtles. I'm like, don't wave them. But
I know.
unfortunately, publishers do. And because as Amy said, this is not a criticism of publishers, it's just economics. You know,
Right.
they have to keep the lights on. So they have to invest all of their time in the top 1%, which in some cases is literally just one author that's carrying the entire company. And I've seen this happen before, right? And publishers are good at a lot, there's a great many things that publishers are good at, right? What they're not good at is personalized marketing and being, typically, like if a traditional publisher, and this is only because the PR departments and publishing houses are like a lot of these staffers are working on 75 titles all at the same time, literally. So they're
Mhm.
blast emailing for reviews and things like that, and just kind of hoping for the best. So there's not a lot of personalized marketing. And at the end of the day, no matter how you publish, the marketing is on you. And I think
Right.
the minute that authors really realize it, they're like, well, then I don't really know why I'm waiting for a traditional publisher to sign me. I think there's a cachet, certainly, that some authors want, and I respect that. I think if that's really what you want, but I think the reality is, if you're sitting here looking at your sales figures and you're thinking, I'm not selling books. What am I doing wrong? And we have a lot of shows about that. So definitely go back and check that. But if you've checked all the boxes and you've done everything right, you're probably in the norm, unfortunately.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. I think whether you're traditionally published or you go indie, you really have to approach, and Penny and I were talking about this in the green room. I said, we don't say it enough, but you really do have to approach becoming an author just like starting a small business.
Yes. Yes.
Especially if you want to do this for a while. Again, we always want to say, throw in the caveat that like you might only have one book that you want to put out there. This might be on your bucket list. You may just be doing it for family or something like that. Obviously, that's not what we're talking about here. But for those of you listening that really want to make money at this and keep doing this for a while, you really do have to think like a small business. And the reality is most small businesses take anywhere from 2 to 3 years to become profitable, please. If they were within striking distance, people listening would probably be slapping me right now. I'm so sorry. And then a lot of businesses that really do make it don't start to feel established until after the 7 year mark. And that's not to make you feel discouraged. It really is to make you feel like I'm actually on track here and I need to push through, not I need to throw in the towel. That's what we really want authors to avoid, because so many authors unfortunately start throwing in the towel way too early based on expectations that just don't align with reality.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think, look, I know when I first started this business, it took a long time before I felt like I was, Amy and I have worked together now for almost 15 years. It's actually going to be 15 years in a couple of weeks. I can't believe it.
No, very
But,
exciting.
but I still sometimes feel like I have to keep my foot on the gas all the time, as she knows.
Yeah.
I know. But, it takes a long time before you really feel like you have your stride. And this is the other thing, though, too, is that if you give yourself a better window, a more real, let me not say a better window, but a more realistic window for success, then the pressure of, oh my gosh, like my launch is like, my book is 90 days old and I've sold 5 copies and 4 of them are to people I know. And you got to take the pressure off,
Mm-hmm.
because when you put the other thing, though, too, is I think when you are so hyper focused on book sales that you are missing, in almost every case, you're missing bigger opportunities or things that you could be doing, maybe corrections that you could be making or other opportunities to marketing your book. A lot of times authors get so far down the rabbit hole of, I got my I got my earnings statement and the flowers have died. There is no hope inside. And they rock in a corner. And that's kind of where they land. And you're missing out on the fact that your book is only 90 days old or 6 months old or, right. I mean,
Or even 2 years old, but you just never did anything. And then all of a
well,
sudden,
yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, exactly.
yeah. But just because you start doing something, again, like you said, Penny, sales don't come on a set timeline, not for books. Like, I think we've done a show on this, but we definitely talk about it a lot. Book buying is very different than other products.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yep.
just because it exists doesn't mean people are going to snag it. It's not an impulse item. You
Yes.
know, people really do because it's not the cost. Books are not expensive for most people. It's not a money thing. It's a time thing. It's an investment thing in terms of their emotional investment in what they're looking to get out of it. I mean, gosh, we've talked about this before, but like obviously fiction titles, we get it. People are emotionally invested. They've got a thing. They know what they like. That's what you're dealing with. Nonfiction, people are looking to solve a problem or they're looking to learn something or they're looking to be better at something. There's a lot of weight in that. And they are very careful about the decision they make to buy another book because we've said this before too. The reality is if somebody reads nonfiction, they've probably got at minimum half a dozen titles on the same topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
keep buying more because they don't have all the answers yet, or it's just something they're super passionate about. But you know what I
Right.
mean? It's like these
Right.
people have a high bar. They know what they want, they know what they're looking for, and they know what they've already learned, right? So they're looking for something at the next level.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a statistic that Amy, that you found for the show. According to the Alliance of Independent Authors, which I love, it's a great group. If you're not a member, you should be. 75% of book sales come from series books, not standalones, which means that, and it does not necessarily you don't necessarily have to write in a series, but an author who writes multiple books, because the best way to sell your first book is with your second, and the best way to sell your second is with your third, and so on and so on. This doesn't mean, because sometimes when I say this to authors, they're like, well, I'm just going to wait till my second book to market my first. No, no.
Yeah.
No. It's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that incrementally, as you release books, this does start to get easier and it starts to pick up, right?
Yes, exactly. And especially if you're those of you that are listening to the podcast are already doing all the right things to make the right decisions, avoid common mistakes. So that's another thing too, in case it needs to be said. This doesn't mean hammer out 10 books in a year and then wait for sales to roll in. You still have to do all the right things and you have to keep your marketing going. But truly, your staying power in showing up in a way that tells consumers that you're in it and you're there for their experience and you're committed to whatever it is that you write, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, that carries a ton of weight, especially when consumers don't know you yet. Showing a dedication to your genre or your topic is a really big deal.
Right, exactly. And we have a whole bunch of shows on, if you feel like, okay, well, now I don't feel so bad about my book sales, but I'd actually like to do something to increase them, because you don't want to stay here, right? Obviously,
Right.
at some point you want to be part of that top 1% of the people who are selling lots and lots of books, or like the guy on Facebook who's selling 10,000. I hope he is, but like I said, I want to see the receipts. We just did a show on this, and I think it's going to be either last week. I don't have the calendar in front of me. It's going to be either last week's show or next week's show, where we talk about, and Amy actually designed that show. We talk about treating your book like a product and treating your readers like consumers as opposed to readers. Amy, do you want to give that a quick reframe? Because I thought that show was, if you haven't listened to that show, it's extraordinary. You should definitely go and check it out.
Yes, we chatted about the difference between when you're new, when you're trying to bring people in, you need to market to people like they're consumers. You market to readers once they're already in your funnel, once they've already read your books, once they're already on your newsletter list. Those are your readers because they've already done it. They're there for you. But up until that point, you need to market to them like consumers. And those people are looking for something very different than your reader is looking for.
Yeah.
You produce your book for the reader, but your marketing has to be for the consumer.
Yes.
Both things have to happen. You can't do one without the other. And
Right.
I want to say, for what it's worth, these stats that we pulled together that were very scary and sad sounding, I do feel very strongly that these represent the majority, which is not doing enough. These are not the people out there doing all the right things and putting in the work, Penny. I think
No,
these
I
are
agree with that. Totally.
yeah, these are people that are producing books and hoping to be the exception to the rule, So that's like all of y'all listening already are already getting past that. You know what I mean? You're doing the right things to not be one of the sad statistics that we mentioned at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, if you're willing to invest, if you've invested your time, and we've had some authors that have written us and said, listen, I'm going back through all of your shows and, going back, several years. And I mean, that's an investment in you. That's an investment in your education. And we absolutely applaud it. I mean, it's why we do the show. But I think that if you need a little bit of a boost, let me just say this. Stop focusing on your book sales. Stop and stop focusing on that number. If you've checked all the boxes, right? Now, if your cover doesn't match the genre, all the things we did a show on that. There's a show for that. But I think if you've checked all the boxes, give yourself a little bit of time, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't publish my first book or start this company and expect the first month just to be gangbusters and this is awesome. And now I can, I'm looking to retire and no. It takes a long time. It takes a long time of doing things that are strategic, staying hyper-focused on what you're going to do to market your book as opposed to, let me just obsess over my KDP or my Kindle Direct Publishing or my publishing sales report or whatever and be depressed and rock in a corner because that's not productive. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I fully agree 100%.
And I would say too, look, if you have a backlist of books that you have done nothing with, my question to you would be why, right? So a lot of times, yes, we're hyper-focused on our latest book. I get it. I do the same thing. If you have other books that you've written, and I see this all the time where authors are like, yeah, I have all these books. I talked to somebody, I think it was, 2 weeks ago. They have like 15 books that they've written. And I'm like, what are you doing with those books? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Well, are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you doing anything with them? And he's like, no. Like almost like they had forgotten that they actually had those books, right? So you got to use all the tools in your toolkit for sure, but just remember that book sale data is murky. Question the guy, and I always say that's a guy could question the individual on Facebook throwing up their sales numbers. Maybe they're doing great and that's awesome, but you also only know part of the story. They could be spending $12,000 running ads and really not making a profit, but they're selling a lot of books, but it's not really, evening out. Amy, what did we miss? Did we miss anything?
No, no, not at all. I think we started with some heavy stuff, but again, those of you listening are already on the right track. And if anything, this just reminds you that it's a process and there are ways to enjoy it. I think educating yourself, like Penny talks about all the time, educating yourself and feeling more in control about what this process entails and what the expectations are will make it much more enjoyable as well, versus flying blind the whole time and only using data that, like we said, has tons of different factors involved and letting that guide you.
Yeah, exactly. And if you were holding out, waiting for a big publisher to notice you, I'm a big believer in signs. So I'm just going to say it. This is your sign to reconsider that idea and maybe look at being your own boss, because even no matter how you publish, you're still going to be your own boss. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I want to remind you to text the word podcast to 888-402-8940. You can send us your ideas, show ideas, questions, what you liked, what you didn't like. And we love to hear from you. And also leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. We love reviews. We check them all the time. We're kind of obsessive about that. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.